So, hi students, welcome back to another video in our series of hemoglobin. Alright, in this series of lectures, we will be covering the whole topic of hemoglobin, hemoprotein, oxygen dissociation curve, and everything. So, basically, we are covering competency number 5.2. Under 5.2, hemoglobin is listed under structure function relationship of proteins. So it's very vital that if you have not seen the previous video, if you have not attended the previous class, I highly recommend you to check the uploaded video and then come back here, because we discussed things slowly, but we covered some important concepts regarding structure of hemoglobin. All right, so we will do this class similarly. I'll be going very slowly. All right, I'll be repeating same things over and over again, so things might get boring. And you might even know many things that I tell you, right? But why I'm doing this? I'm doing this for you so that you can catch up even if you join late in the class. All right, so that's the motto of this class, because if I proceed very fast, if you join later, half of it is already done. Okay, anyway, so in the last class we concluded our discussion how iron gives iron of heme gives it red color. Okay, and there we discussed the difference in the energy levels at the d orbital, okay, at the iron atom, ferrous atom, and there are also methanol bridges. I will come back to this later. Okay, there is a complex discussion. I told you while we are doing arterial blood gas analysis, that is ABG class, that arterial blood looks exactly like this. If your monitor is actually supporting the thing, okay, the color scheme that I'm using here, you see this is very bright red, okay, and this is dark red. Okay, I am sure you are able to see this, right? So this is actually arterial blood. Arterial blood, the color is like this, very bright red, gorgeous, as if it is glowing. And this and venous blood may be even darker than this. Okay, so there is a reason why the state of oxygenation and deoxygenation changes. The color will get to this later. Okay, but just now know this, it is the complex game of electron orbitals of oxyhemoglobin and deoxyhemoglobin, how they absorb energy, how they absorb visible range of light. Basically it's physics, how a thing emits color, and nothing special, right? So today we will briefly conclude our last part, because we were discussing iron, and then we'll move to globin. When iron is over, the part of discussion regarding heme will be over. Okay, so dietary iron deficiency, what are its features, right? The single line, you need to give a one-liner answer in physiology. If you are asked, okay, tell me in one line, what is the microscopic feature of iron deficiency or iron deficiency anemia, the answer is microcytic hypochromic anemia. Okay, remember, microcytic hypochromic, it means the red blood cells will be smaller in size, okay, and the chromicity, that is the pigmentation, will also be low. Okay, not only that, the number of RBCs will also be less, definitely. So the numbers will be less, whatever RBCs are there will be small in size, and they will not be as brightly stained, okay, because naturally if iron is deficient, heme synthesis will be lowered and hemoglobin will be low. Okay, so microcytic hypochromic anemia, that is one line answer, how that is the microscopic feature of iron deficiency anemia, which is the most common type of anemia. Okay, so what actually happens in our body? Okay, the basic physiology and biochemistry. See, when iron is, why it can happen and why iron deficiency anemia can happen and what is the outcome? Okay, actually there are two reasons. Number one is low dietary iron. That is fine, because majority of the iron that our body needs is not coming from the diet. Okay, it is recycled iron. Okay, so if chronically low iron containing diet is given, it may result in anemia. But most important factor is if there is some loss. Okay, for example, loss in bleeding, regular monthly bleeding in case of female via menstrual cycle. Okay, all these things can lead to anemia. Also in males, chronic loss of blood due to hookworm infestation. You know, when hookworm infects, there is loss of blood in stool. Okay, इसलिए this is very important for all of you. since I don't live in a palace where the bathroom is constantly dry always. Many family members use them and it's always moist, right? So irrespectively how clean and clear it looks, okay, it may look very clean and clear. You may be using a toilet cleaning Harpic, etc. every day, right? Generally we don't use. Even if you are using bleach day by day, this hookworm is just like our skin bacteria. Even if you wash it very well, the bacteria will reappear soon after an hour. Similarly, those hookworms, they are local to the bathroom floor, okay? So make a point to always use bathroom slippers. This is beyond this hemoglobin chapter, okay? This is I'm telling you for life. Always, whoever that is, male, female, bacche, bude, whatever, please use a bathroom slipper, because those hookworms can get into your skin, penetrate your intact skin. Okay, you will be reading much more in microbiology, but be scared, daro isse. Okay, it is much more dangerous than COVID. Okay, because it is living in your home and you are oblivious, you are not aware of it. Okay, so hookworm se bacho, always use slipper bathroom because they cannot penetrate rubber slipper. So whatever it is, if you allow increased contact time with your bathroom floor, invariably hookworms will get into your bloodstream. It will drain blood. You will get anemic as time progresses. Okay, in some people it is more, in some people it is less. Anyway, so low heme and hemoglobin formation. So all this will lead to decreased iron load. Okay, so that will lead to low heme and hemoglobin formation. What will happen? Definitely oxygen transport, that is the main role of hemoglobin, will be low. So less oxygen transport and release at the tissues and cells, definitely, right? What will happen due to that? There will be low cellular respiration. So all things are connected in chain, okay? If oxygen is not there, this cellular respiration will be low. Cellular respiration low means electron transport chain will be hampered, okay? Basically, this is the cellular respiration last stage by which all the reducing equivalents, NADH, FADH2, etc. are getting converted to energy currency in mitochondria, that is ATP, right? And when ATP production is low, everything gets stalled, okay? The activity lowers, and that is the main reason why fatigue happens, okay? So much is involved in simple iron deficiency anemia, okay? This is basically easy to understand. The concept is very easy, but you should keep it in mind. So that was all about heme, okay? So entire previous day's lecture and the small part regarding iron deficiency anemia. Remember, I'll be again discussing the same thing in much more detail if I am teaching you iron, whether in live class or I'll be uploading a video. I already have got iron metabolism, all mineral metabolism video in my channel, okay? So you can have a look if you have time. Anyway, so now we are moving to the structure of globin. So hemoglobin, heme, globin, right? So heme we are done with. Now we are moving to globin. We'll be proceeding very slowly. Okay, so just follow along. We already know, so I'll be recapping many things that we have discussed in previous day's class, okay, and maybe this whole class will go in recapping only. So adult hemoglobin has 4 polypeptide chains, 2 alpha and 2 beta, identical pair, okay. This is something important only for MCQ purpose. You don't need to remember the exact weight, okay, but what you should remember, this one, globin gene is on 16th chromosome. Okay, this is a must know. So alpha globin 141 amino acid 15,000 Dalton, you may choose to forget. No point in remembering all this. Okay, even if you forget before the day of exam, no harm. Okay, nobody will become a scholar remembering molecular weight of alpha globin. Okay, this is just given in textbook and I have quoted it because I need to. Anyway, composition is 141 amino acid, that too is forgettable. This is very important. Okay, alpha globin is present in 16th chromosome and naturally beta globin is present in 11th chromosome. These first two information, 146 and 15,866 Dalton, you can simply ignore. So remember, alpha 16th, beta 11th. Okay, very important MCQ. Okay, in hemoglobin, so just look at these numbers. So since there are 2 alpha chains, you simply multiply them by 2. Okay, and then you add them, so you get the total amino acid residues. Okay, this is again important for MCQ, because even if you don't remember the exact number of amino acid in alpha, beta, okay, unless you are giving USMLE, there may be combination. Okay, just remember the beta one is more, okay, compared to alpha. This much I hope you can remember, okay. So beta is more compared to alpha, just 10 more, 5 more each, and total it's 574. Okay, this is how the 4 globin chain looks like. We have seen multiple 3D diagrams, so we are moving on, right? And I've told you each linear globin polypeptide chain fold to form a 3-dimensional tertiary structure subunit. Okay, I told you the secondary structure are helix. Ultimately, the tertiary structure is a globular spheroidal structure, but the secondary structure are helices. Okay, and helix means there are turn. Okay, you know secondary structure, helix, turn, helix, all those things, super secondary structure, right? So before a tertiary structure, if we look into the secondary structure and super secondary structure, there are multiple helices. Okay, plural of helix are helices. Okay, and we now know that it has got 8 helices and they are named A to H, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Okay. This is how they look like. Again, you don't need to remember, you don't need to draw, nothing. Okay, just remember they are named as such. Okay, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Actually, the A, B, C's are towards the surface and E, F, G, H are generally at the core. Excuse me. Okay. However, why these names are important? Because amino acids are attached to the various zones. Okay, so based on the position and based on the part of the helix that are attached, they are named A2, B3 like that. Okay. So now we have discussed heme pocket in our previous lecture. We saw heme pocket is basically a central zone that is in the central hydrophobic zone. So every tertiary structure has got a central heme pocket. Okay, it's a hollow crevice in the, crevice in the hollow hydrophobic area, right? And it is there that the heme moiety, that is the ferrous iron, is located. Okay. So since it is in the interior, we should know the relationship of the helices in relation to heme pocket. Okay. Remember the inner ones, okay, the later ones, the first A, B, C, D and G, okay, they don't come in contact with the heme pocket, okay, and E, F and H helices, they actually surround the heme pocket, okay. The heme group is actually tucked between the E and F helices of the globin gene. Again, this is another MCQ, okay, you please take the screenshot. Okay, these are all facts that you just need to remember, nothing. But if you do, if you see, you know what's the proper approach. Whenever I say take the screenshot, there will be multiple things. There are multiple slides. For example, let me say 500 slides, okay? And from them, I will say take screenshot of 35 of them. Why I tell them? It's your job to save all those important files in a single folder, okay? So that if you have not done it till now, please start doing it. Because before the day of exam, you can simply just like a photo album, slide them, swipe them over and over again, and then you will be at least knowing something, okay? Anyway, this is an MCQ thing and not a must-know area. So, see, as I told you, amino acids in the globin chain are identified by number 1, the helix name, okay? Either it is associated with A or it is located near the B, C or D. And in what position, okay? So, most important of them to remember is E7 histidine and F8 histidine. Naturally, histidine comes in relation to E helix and F helix, okay? The E7 one, that is the amino acid in the histidine in the 7th position that comes in relation to the E helix is known as distal histidine, okay, and F8 is known as proximal histidine. It may sound, sir, E comes first and F comes later, okay. Proximal means in front of me and distal means away from the center, okay, but this is not calculated with respect to A and A to H, okay, this is calculated with respect to the center, that is heme, okay, and this F8 is located much closer to the heme moiety. And the E7 is located further, okay, so it is known as distal histidine. And just remember, this is very important, this is very important for MCQ, okay. E7 histidine, distal histidine and F8 is proximal histidine. Just remember only one, you can remember the other, okay. Other amino acids you can simply forget. This again, I am repeating the same thing. This is actually the exact coordinate. Okay, don't need to remember at all. Okay, if it is given in a textbook, you can simply bracket it and cross. And I think it may not be given in a textbook at all. But remember, distal histidine E7, proximal histidine F8. Okay. Now, very important. Iron is linked to these two are very important MCQ, Viva, everything. So iron is related to which histidine? It is related to the proximal histidine. Okay. Oxygen is related to which histidine? It is related to distal histidine. Okay. You can remember OD, whatever, once daily, whatever, how you remember, it is immaterial. You should remember the right thing. Okay. Oxygen related to distal histidine, that is E7. Iron is related to proximal histidine. If you can remember the proximal histidine and distal histidine names, that is F8 and E7, it is much easier because Fe is related to F8. So FF. Okay. F. Anyway, so proximal histidine is F8 related to iron, right? See, again same thing. Proximal and distal histidine are present in heme pocket. Okay. What they do? They facilitate binding of oxygen, right? So linking of divalent oxygen. Now this is important. So I told you, see, the proximal histidine is related to iron. So iron is related to getting attached to proximal histidine at one end, and on the other end it is attached to oxygen, right? And oxygen is attached to iron in one valence and it is attached to distal histidine on the other end. Okay, I will show you the diagram, you have already seen later, but just remember, oxygen is related to one side iron and one side distal histidine. Iron is related to one side oxygen and one side proximal histidine. So the sequence is proximal histidine, iron, oxygen and distal histidine. Okay, fine. I'll be showing you the diagram, then it will be much more clear if you are not understanding anything right now. So in order to attain stability of oxygen, it is bound to both heme and globin. Okay, so this is what I was telling you. Okay, now see, this is one histidine. Okay, this is iron, this is oxygen, and it will be related to another histidine. Okay, this diagram may be flipped, may be reversed, may be 90-degree rotated. Okay, and they will give you numbers. Suppose this is number 1 and this is number 2. So 2 histidine molecules are there. You need to identify which one is proximal and which one is distal. Okay, if you remember the formula, the one that is related to iron, okay, F8, this one is proximal histidine. Okay, and the one that is related to oxygen, this is distal histidine. So the sequence is proximal histidine, iron, oxygen, and then distal histidine. Okay, and this is the plane of the pyrrole ring, tetrapyrrole ring that we were discussing the earlier day. Okay, the nitrogen or protoporphyrin ring, whatever you can say. These were the methyl, vinyl, methyl, propionyl, methyl, methyl, vinyl. So we have already discussed them. Again, let me show you another diagram. Okay, see, in this diagram the whole thing have been flipped vertically. So this one is proximal histidine. Okay, it is attached to the iron. Okay, this big molecule is the iron. Okay, this iron is attached to oxygen, and this oxygen is attached to distal histidine. Okay, so this concept should be very clear. You don't need to draw all these things. Okay, if you can draw, then it's awesome. Examiner will put a garland on your paper or will put on you. Okay, being alive. But if you can't, just remember, write this relation at least. Okay, or you can draw a schematic diagram. Fine. So what are the functions of hemoglobin? Again, we know, let us recap something. Okay, hemoglobin has got important function in respiratory mechanism, mainly transport oxygen and carbon dioxide, the majority being oxygen. Okay, 97 to 100%. And carbon dioxide, minor, 15 to 25. Can you tell me why? Because oxygen is not soluble. Okay, the only way oxygen can be transferred in blood is via combination with hemoglobin, forming oxyhemoglobin. And carbon dioxide is actually very much soluble in water, okay, in blood. Okay, so it can be transferred just like that. So carbamine hemoglobin concentration is much less. So generally, deoxyhemoglobin transport protons, and this is known as Haldane effect. I will be explaining this Haldane effect, what is Bohr effect later. Okay, for MCQ purpose, what type of hemoglobin transport proton? It is the deoxyhemoglobin. Remember the Haldane effect. You just ignore Haldane effect, Bohr effect right now. I will be explaining it in detail later. Okay. By then, if you can read your textbook, if you can make yourself understand, it's fine. It will be much easier for you to understand. But let's not confuse you right now with effects. But deoxyhemoglobin transport protons. This you need to remember. I hope you are noting this down. Okay, or if you are marking it in your textbook. Okay. So remember. Histidine, you know, the amino acid, you need to remember all the side chains of amino acid I told you, and I hope you remember that histidine has got an imidazole ring. So you see, one application of one chapter is getting applied to the other, next one, right? So hemoglobin plays a role as a buffer. Okay, I have discussed in detail what is buffer, how everything happens in the buffer system, pH, acid base balance, everything. So what is buffer shouldn't be the problem for you to understand. Just remember, for anything to be in buffer, it needs to be either in salt form and its acid form, right? So hemoglobin, in its since it has got a histidine, okay, that imidazole ring actually amino acid can precipitate in buffering mechanism. Just remember how hemoglobin acts as buffer due to the presence of imidazole group of amino acid histidine. This is the main answer. Okay. So hemoglobin, very important physiological buffer, acts as first line of defense, just like other buffer, bicarbonate buffer. How hemoglobin acts as buffer? Due to the presence of histidine. So what is present in histidine? It is the imidazole ring that can help in proton donor and proton acceptor, right? So other than buffer, the main role of hemoglobin is oxygen exchange. Okay, that is the main role of hemoglobin, because even if buffering capacity of hemoglobin is rested, there are many other buffers, bicarbonate buffer, phosphate buffer in our body that can take care of the acid base balance, but nobody can take care of the responsibility of hemoglobin, that is to transfer oxygen and carbon dioxide. So gaseous exchange is the main role, and this is what happens. Oxygen comes in from lungs and it is delivered to the tissues, okay, from center to the periphery via the RBC. So why do you think hemoglobin is important? What if hemoglobin was not there? I mean, why did nature at all made this hemoglobin? I already gave you the answer. Okay, the reason being, presence of hemoglobin in blood gives less load to the heart. Okay, what is this? This can be asked as an explain why type of question, even in physiology. Okay, so presence of hemoglobin in blood gives less load to the heart. Okay, now I told you that oxygen is almost insoluble, sparingly soluble. Very small amount is dissolved in blood, right? So if it were to travel in only soluble form in blood, okay, then heart would have needed to perform in an excess. Okay, just see the numbers over here. Body cells require around 500 gram per day of molecular oxygen. Okay, and since the solubility of oxygen is very, very, very low, okay, so this soluble amount of oxygen that is being transferred via the blood is less than 30 gram per day. So it is creating a huge deficit. There will be a gross hypoxia in the tissues, right? So if body were to depend upon this dissolved oxygen in the plasma, normally what is the amount of blood that is pumped? Okay, it is 4 liter per minute. Generally it can vary. Cardiac output, it can vary from heart rate to the volume to, cardiac output. There are multiple things, peripheral resistance, things that are, uh, what can I say, things that are determining the actual need of cardiac output, exercise, anything, heart rate. So in spite of that, the load of the heart is much lower, because just by pumping, for example, 4 liter of blood, all the need of the body oxygen is being met. Why? Because someone else is actually doing the job for heart. It is carrying the oxygen and it is delivering. If it was not there, if heart would have depended only on the soluble, small amount of oxygen that is dissolved in plasma, it would have needed to pump out 140 liter per minute, which is huge. Okay? And then maybe the heart would have tired out, would have died. Okay? So these are all something that is not happening because nature has chosen a carrier, okay, in the form of hemoglobin. So mind it, since oxygen is sparingly soluble, it is much dependent on hemoglobin for transport. Had it not been soluble, heart would have needed to pump out a huge amount of blood, which is not feasible physiologically. Okay. So this is a polar oxygen binding protein. Okay, so if you are joining the class now, okay, for the late comers, what we are discussing, hemoglobin, we are discussing hemoglobin, which is a polar oxygen binding protein, okay, that carries oxygen, okay, and it increases effective transportation of oxygen through the blood basically. Okay, now presence of hemoglobin in blood facilitates the oxygen transport by approx 70 times more than what solubility in plasma would do, right? So that this is the amount of load that is decreased for the heart. Okay, heart has to work 70 times less compared to what if hemoglobin was not there, right? So total hemoglobin that is present in RBC, okay, what is the amount? I discussed in previous class. If you don't remember, it doesn't matter. Generally, 1 billion, more than 1 billion of oxygen molecules are carried by the total amount of hemoglobin that is present in 1 RBC. This is over a course of life. It is not in each cycle. Okay, definitely we live long and you get, these are all fun facts. Okay, so what does hemoglobin is actually doing? It is taking up oxygen from the lung to the tissue, and it is taking up carbon dioxide in reverse fashion. It is taking up carbon dioxide from the tissue and it is delivering to the lungs. So this is basically serving as a vehicle of transport so that each and every cell gets oxygen. What is the most important cell that is dependent on oxygen for functioning? That is brain. Okay, this is the organ for which this was created by nature. Okay, because if brain fails in any hypoxia, why do we need to put the patient in ventilator? Now there is oxygen crisis in COVID times. Why do we need oxygen? It's because if the brain suffers, even if patient survives, he will be in vegetative state, he will be in comatose state, he will become unresponsive. Okay, so brain function is the most essential function for which we need oxygen. Okay, and to achieve this, basically what does oxygen do? Oxygen goes up. It is the final electron acceptor in electron transport chain. We'll be teaching you. I hope you already know from your NCERT +2 lessons, and that leads to production of ATP via the OXPHOS or oxidative phosphorylation. So what are the salient features of oxygenation and deoxygenation of hemoglobin? Okay, again let us recap a few things and let us know a few things. Remember, hemoglobin gets oxygenated at lungs, okay, at increased PO2 concentration of 100 to 120 millimeter of Hg. This is an important MCQ. Whenever the oxygen tension or oxygen partial pressure is around this range, 100 to 120, then formation of oxyhemoglobin takes place. Okay. And also the carbon dioxide partial pressure needs to be low naturally. So oxygen needs to be high, carbon dioxide partial pressure needs to be low, and the value of oxygen partial pressure should be 100 to 120. Okay. So the I've told you this is the saturation at the lungs. Okay. So what is the saturation of oxygen, I mean the partial pressure of oxygen after it has delivered, I mean at the venous end? Venous blood is something which the tissue drains. So artery supplies and veins drain. Okay, the supply is the tap and drain means that is in your toilet. Okay, the exits. So at the exit, the partial pressure of oxygen is around 35 to 40 millimeter of mercury. So 100 to 120 at the arterial end, at the lungs. Okay, arterial blood when it is getting oxygenated, and 35 to 40 nanometer at the venous range. Fine. So you see, when the blood leaves the lung, okay, hemoglobin is 97% saturated with oxygen. What is the rest 3%? Naturally, it can be other gases, it can be carbon dioxide, anything, but 97% generally is oxyhemoglobin. Okay. Under resting condition means when the blood is not in lungs. In lungs, oxygen is very high, right? When the blood is not in lungs, it is roaming here and there. Okay, suppose in capillary. Okay. Or when it is returning to the oxygen back for deoxygenation, the hemoglobin is about 75% saturated with oxygen. This is very important. It is not that 100% at lungs and 0%. No, never. Okay. But remember, I mean, definitely it cannot be, oxygen cannot be zero over there. Even our exhaled air contains much more oxygen than carbon dioxide. But this is important. Whenever it leaves the lung, it is 97% saturated with oxygen. And when it goes back to the lung for reoxygenation, that is venous blood or deoxyhemoglobin, still the majority is oxygen. Okay, it is 75% saturated with oxygen. Now, what pulse oximeter does? Pulse oximeter measures the percentage of hemoglobin that is fully saturated with oxygen in arterial blood. Okay, you should know the importance of pulse oximeter now, right? If you don't know the importance of pulse oximeter now, I mean, you should know. Okay, there is no argument regarding this. Every year when we teach this, again the students are like, man, what is pulse oximeter? But just imagine how something can change the medical curriculum. This is so much important right now. So pulse oximeter reads the percentage of hemoglobin that is fully saturated with oxygen in arterial blood, right? So whenever we are respiring in atmospheric oxygen, I told you 97% is normally saturated. Okay, when we are taking deep breath, right, or when we are under some trees during daytime, when we are in oxygen rich environment, the saturation can go much higher. It can even reach to 100%. And when we are given oxygen, inhaled oxygen, pure oxygen, 100% oxygen, okay, then the saturation should always be 100%, provided the capacity of hemoglobin to acquire oxygen is at maximum. Okay. What happens? Number one, this, and number two, the capacity of lungs to deliver oxygen to the hemoglobin is also at maximum. So whenever one or two, I mean one of this or even both of these are at fault, saturation will fall. Imagine the oxygen is, I mean lungs are working perfectly, but the hemoglobin is now at a problematic state. For example, there is formation of ferric form of iron, that is methemoglobin formation. For example, there is formation of carboxyhemoglobin by carbon monoxide poisoning. So hemoglobin is now bound to something so that it cannot bind oxygen. In that case, if you apply a pulse oximeter, oxygen saturation will be very low, right? Again, in case of COVID, what is happening? Pneumonia, lung consolidation is happening. So the lung physiology is at problem. So the lung cannot deliver the amount of oxygen, which should have been 97% from the atmosphere, to the hemoglobin. Therefore, saturation is falling. So, what we need to do? We need to give oxygen from outside. More saturation fall, more the amount of oxygen we need to increase. 4 liter, 6 liter, 8 liter. Even if it is not happening, we need to give with positive pressure. So first we give oxygen just like that via mask, so that the normal respiratory pressure can overcome the oxygen deficit just by taking more percentage of oxygen. Even if that fails, we need to put the patient into ventilator, where 100% oxygen will be pumped mechanically because lung functions are gone. Okay. So this is why actually the saturation PO2, it is so much important. So thus the degree of saturation of oxygen is related to oxygen tension, definitely, and oxygen requirement for metabolic use at cellular level. Okay, and there is another factor that is not being considered here. Over here we are considering that the lung is normal. Definitely if lung is normal, oxygen tension should be normal, and after oxygen tension is normal, the requirement of oxygen at metabolic level should also be normal. If something is hampered at cellular level, again saturation will fall. So what is the feature of, under what condition, or something you should know about oxygenation of hemoglobin? Okay. Oxygen binds to hemoglobin to form oxyhemoglobin, that is known as HbO2. Okay. Oxygen links to the ferrous form of iron of heme, and the linkage is done non-enzymatically, loosely and reversibly. Okay. There is no covalent bond formation, etc., because it is occurring as a temporary friendship. Okay, the friendship will be broken as soon as it reaches the tissue, right? So during oxygenation, I have discussed it on the previous day, one hemoglobin molecule with 4 heme can bind 4 oxygen molecules. So binding of oxygen to heme subunit is weak at low PO2. Very important. Understand what I am saying. Binding of oxygen to heme of hemoglobin subunit, it is weak at low PO2 and it is tight at high PO2. You understand my point? Whenever the oxygen tension is low, it means the tissues need more oxygen. Therefore, the oxygen is bound very loosely to hemoglobin so that it can easily give away, it can easily donate the oxygen to the tissues. Relatively, when oxygen saturation is very high, everything is well and good oxygenated, then the binding is much more tighter. Fine? Remember, it is weakly bound at low PO2. This is enough. Okay, automatically you will understand the opposite. Why it is weakly bound at low PO2? Because tissues need more oxygen, hemoglobin can easily donate more oxygen. What is the time that is needed for an oxyhemoglobin to form? 1/100th of a second. Okay, so in 1 second, 100 molecule of oxygen can be easily oxygenated. So 100 molecule of hemoglobin can form oxyhemoglobin in 1 second. And the iron is in ferrous form. I told you why it is non-enzymatically. Okay, because it is not an oxidoreductase type of enzymatic reaction. If it was, what would have happened? Oxygen would have oxygenated the iron. Even if iron is bound to oxygen normally, chemically in vitro, if you allow oxygen to come in contact with iron, what happens? Rust forms, right? So and it also oxidizes to the ferric form whenever it is possible. Okay, right? FeO2 is ferrous and rust is Fe2O3. Okay, what is the formula of rust? Okay, it is 2Fe2O3 3H2O. So normally whenever you are putting iron in nature, whenever it comes in contact with oxygen, it is oxidized to the ferric form. Okay, but this is not happening in lungs. It is very important. Okay, it is non-enzymatically loosely bound. Even if oxygen tension is high, I told you it is tightly bound, the bond is still non-enzymatic, loose and reversible. Okay, so the key word is it is not oxygenated. Okay, However, oxygenation of hemoglobin molecule, okay, it leads to a considerable structural change, okay, in the globin subunit. So I told you, when it is binding to the iron heme, it is loosely bound. However, when an oxygen is binding, other things in the hemoglobin molecule undergo changes. Conformational changes means how they are oriented in space. That thing changes. Okay. Generally, let us look at the electronic conformation first. Okay. So now we look at much more detailed binding of this. You take a screenshot for understanding. Okay, not for your MCQ remembering. Okay, binding of oxygen to the hemoglobin. Okay, alters the electronic configuration and alters the d orbital energy, right? This causes a difference in absorption spectra. So once oxygen is bound, there is some change, and when oxygen is not bound, there is again some change. Okay, so if we measure under visible range, for example, that is 578 nanometer, this is a visible range of light. Okay, when it is deoxygenated, it is due to this peak that it is appearing predominantly bluish. It is not blue in color, definitely it is red. It is red, but as if blue is also mixed with red. All right. But when it is fully oxygenated, the blue ones do not predominate. Okay, this is the peak of deoxygenation, and these are oxygenation peaks. Basically, the take-home message is oxygen in deoxygenated hemoglobin is 75%, and that leads to alteration of d orbital electronic configuration that causes an absorption spectral difference. That is why deoxygenated blood appears bluish in color, and fully oxygenated blood appear bright red in color. Fine. Say, this is not only important for our visibility, because when you are doing ABG, that is arterial blood gas analysis, just by looking at the blood sample, we can say, oh, you have done wrong. You can tell your juniors, okay, you have done wrong, go and do an arterial tap. This is not that much easier. I mean that not only this is essential, what is much more essential, if we analyze the blood sample, so your senior or your junior may contradict you. No, sir, to me it appears bright red, and to you it may appear dark red. So how you can solve this query? Then you need to use a machine that is known as spectrophotometer. We will be teaching you spectrophotometer in much more detail in practical class. But just know this, spectrophotometer is a machine. So whenever we are seeing, okay, we are seeing wavelength of varied, mixed wavelengths. Okay, a white light is a mixture of wavelength from blue to red, everything. Okay, there is violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, red, everything over there, right? So a spectrophotometer can send a monochromatic light. Monochromatic beam of light means we can ask the spectrophotometer to send the exact wavelength of light. Okay, and the exact wavelength of light, for example, over here we send a red wavelength of light. Okay, normally, you know from your physics lesson what will happen if we see something through a red cellophane paper. Basically, we are only seeing the red light. So any object that is red in color will appear red. Any object that is white in color will again appear red, because red can reflect red wavelength and white is reflecting all wavelength, and that is getting absorbed by the red cellophane paper. Other than that, if you are observing through a pure red color, everything else should appear black. That is the normal physiology, right? Likewise, the measurement, so if you send a single color of light, the nature of absorbance determination is much easier. So we use a spectrophotometer and we send 578 nanometer of light. So measuring the absorption at 578 nanometer, you need to set the spectrophotometer at 578 nanometer. You need to put the blood sample and need to see the absorbance. The absorbance value will tell you if the absorbance value is very high, okay, at 578 nanometer, okay, this will tell you that this is arterial blood. And if the absorbance value is low, it will be contaminated with venous blood. Okay, often it is mixed blood. Anyway, so this is the basically physics behind red color of blood. So see, why it is not in ferric form? Because in ferric form the iron cannot bind to oxygen. Okay, whenever it changes to ferric form, it is known as meth hemoglobin, right? So ferric form of iron is not useful, it cannot bind to oxygen. So I told you what was happening when hemoglobin was oxygenated at lung. So it happens in high PCO2, PO2, and low PCO2. In here, when it goes to the tissues, when it is getting deoxygenated, the reverse is happening. So deoxygenation happens when there is increased PCO2 and when there is decreased PO2 levels at 40 millimeter. That was 100 to 120 at lung level. At tissue level, it is 40 millimeter of mercury, and now hemoglobin will lose all its oxygen, okay, and become deoxygenated. Next, our last part of discussion, we'll briefly discuss the role of 2,3-bisphosphoglycerate, okay, and how it helps in oxygen dissociation, what are the structural changes, and we'll be done with, and we'll continue on the next class. So you should know in glycolysis 1,3-bisphosphoglycerate is formed, okay, and there is a cycle that is RLS Rappaport-Lubering shunt, okay, by which 2,3-BPG is formed. This is very important. In many textbooks, okay, it may be written as 2,3-DPG. Which is right? 2,3-diphosphoglycerate or 2,3-bisphosphoglycerate? Okay. The concept should be very clear. Okay. See. These are carbon atoms, right? Whenever any functional group is attached to two adjacent carbons, okay, it should always be called bis. Whenever two functional group are attached to the same carbon, it is termed as di. Very important concept, I am telling you. If you are missing this out, it's very problematic for you in Viva. So over here, the name says 2,3 means it is one phosphate is attached to 2 carbon, one phosphate is attached to 3 carbon. So it is 2,3-bisphosphoglycerate. Okay, in case of ATP, all the phosphates are attached to a single carbon, so it is adenosine diphosphate, right? So the name is 2,3-BPG. There is no confusion. 2,3-DPG is simply wrong. Okay, so what happens? 2,3-BPG, okay, where it is bound, it is located centrally. I'll show you in the diagram. I'll show the diagram, but just note these features. Okay, first read this and I'll again show you. It will be much clear. 2,3-BPG is located centrally. However, it is pushed out of the deoxyhemoglobin molecule during oxygenation. So 2,3-BPG is present in deoxygenated molecule. So it is present in deoxy, and during oxygenation, this molecule is pushed out. Okay. Why? Because during oxygenation, the globin chains are moving closer to each other. Okay, I'll show you the diagram. Don't panic. During oxygenation, the globin chains are moving closer to each other. Okay. So what happens in deoxygenation? The reverse happens. Globin chains are pulled apart during deoxygenation and 2,3-BPG enters. Okay, resulting in unloading of oxygen. Okay, see what is happening in deoxyhemoglobin. Okay, when it is deoxygenated, the hemoglobin molecules are far apart. The globin chains are apart from each other. Okay, you can see the distance. The distance between each of them is much more, and 2,3-BPG is located in the center. Okay, what happens when oxygenation is happening? Okay, so increased PO2, oxygenation is happening. 2,3-BPG is pushed out. Okay, and the globin chains come in closer to each other. So everything is closer. Okay, the whole distance between them is much less. Okay, again during deoxygenation, what happens? So what favors deoxygenation? Increased pH, increased TCO2, failing PO2, we'll be discussing these factors that help in oxygenation and deoxygenation. We'll be discussing in detail. Okay. And also you should ignore whatever is written over here, right? This is what happens when 2,3-BPG enters. Okay. 2,3-BPG facilitates deoxygenation. I mean, facilitates deoxygenation, facilitates delivery of oxygen to the tissues. So once it reaches the center, oxygen molecules are delivered out, right? And once it goes out from the center, all the hemoglobin chains, all the globin chains comes close to each other, okay, and it helps in oxygen loading. I think you can note down another thing, conformational change that is happening over here, regarding which we'll be discussing in our next class, okay. You see, over here when oxygen is entering, the gap, these gaps are much more, and whenever it is deoxygenated, these gaps are much less, as if it is tightened, okay, and if this is relaxed. Okay, this is the basic foundation of T and R form of hemoglobin, which we'll be discussing in later classes, but this is evident from this diagram also. Okay, so remember, this is the globin chain coming closer to each other. It has got nothing to do with T form or R form. In oxygenated hemoglobin, globin chains are close to each other and there is no 2,3-BPG. In deoxygenated hemoglobin C, it is written 2,3-D. Absolutely wrong. I hope you have noticed, right? So 2,3-BPG, it is actually taken from a famous textbook, okay, where it is written wrongly. Basic organic chemistry concept wrong. It can happen. So 2,3-BPG, when it is in the center, deoxygenation will happen, right? Okay. You see, this is deoxygenated hemoglobin, okay, and this is oxygenated hemoglobin. We saw this was the 3D conformational structure. Whenever it is getting oxygenated, the globin chains are coming closer to each other, and whenever it is getting deoxygenated, it is getting far away from each other because they need to accommodate this 2,3-BPG in the center. Fine. So when it is oxygenated, okay, the heme, now if we take a cross section, okay, I will be discussing this diagram on a later day. So this is basically the dome form of hemoglobin, deoxygenated hemoglobin, right? Just a few things that I will, after which I will wrap up this class. When hemoglobin is fully saturated with oxygen, each gram of hemoglobin is bound to 1.34 ml of oxygen, okay? Just know this, not essential for you to remember, okay? In the next class, we'll be discussing the mechanism of cooperative binding of oxygen. Cooperative binding of oxygen means that is one molecule of oxygen, when it binds, it facilitates binding of more molecule of oxygen. Okay. Anyway, so this is about the progress till this class. All right. So I'll be moving to the next series of lecture next week. Okay. Till then, bye and take care.